When I was first setting up my shop, I threw up a couple of French cleats behind my miter saw to hold my drills and power tools. I also converted an old cabinet to a pegboard system for most of my hand tools. While both of these solutions were great back then, it's time for an upgrade. The cabinet is overflowing and the use of space for the two French cleats is inefficient. And I have some cord management issues that I'd like to fix as well. Stick around to see how it turns out. If you've never seen or heard of a French cleat system before, it's a really simple and effective way to hang things. One angled piece of material attaches to the wall while another piece of material with the opposite angle attaches to the piece to be hung. It works great for workshops because it's customizable and really strong. I wanted to start with a blank slate, so I removed everything from the wall and pegboard cabinet. I stored all my tools in a somewhat organized fashion so I could still easily use them during the project. I'm not exactly sure how I got this pegboard in here because it was a bear to remove, but once I got it off, it already made the space feel bigger. I used the old French cleats to make notes of the stud locations and then removed them and the demo was complete. Our house is built on a slope, so I had to account for the foundation in the garage, which comes up to about my chest. To build out the wall, I cut several 2x4s to 4-foot lengths and then measured for the notch that was needed in each one. I used my table saw with a squeeze clamp as a stop block to cut the long side of the notch and then my miter saw to cut the short side. There was still a little bit of material holding the notch in place, so I used my jigsaw to finish the cut. I repeated this process 6 times to make the studs that will support the French cleat wall. And I know these look a little weird right now, but I promise it'll make sense soon. With the shape of the studs complete, it was time to fasten them to the wall. To do this, I used 4-inch lag screws countersunk about 1.5 inches into each stud. I used a Forstner bit to create the countersink and then drilled a pilot hole to make driving the screws a little easier. Each stud is getting 3 lag screws and each one of them will go at least 2 inches into the wall after the 1/2 inch of drywall, so I think it's going to be plenty strong for the weight I'm asking it to hold. I used a magnetized hex head to drive the screws, and here you can see how the notch I created accounts for the foundation and comes all the way down to the top of the workbenches. These studs will be covered with some 1/4 inch birch plywood, which will not only look great but also provide a larger surface area for the French cleat system. With the studs strongly secured, I started to attach the birch plywood. This is an entire 4x8 sheet, but I had to have it cut in half at the hardware store so it would fit in my car. Because the wall-mounted section of the cleats will be screwed through this sheet and into the studs, I just held this in place with a couple of brads. And before moving on to make the actual cleats, I covered the plywood with some paste wax to bring out the grain and add a layer of protection. I don't have a buffing pad, so I tried using a rag attached to my sander, and that worked okay for a little while, but eventually fell off, so I finished it by hand. Adding finish to a nice piece of wood never gets old for me, and for shop furniture, paste wax is definitely my favorite. Now it was time to start making the cleats, and to do this, I put the blade on my table saw at 45 degrees. I used a 1/2 sheet of 3/4 inch birch plywood for these, and I was quickly reminded that my mobile table saw stand is definitely not ideal for that much material. I took my time and set up extra outfeed support so I was able to get through it, but it was definitely a little sketchy there for a bit. In hindsight, I should have cut the sheet in 4-foot lengths, which have made it a lot easier to manage. With the cleats all cut, I transferred the stud location so that I could drill pilot holes for the screws. Since these have a 45-degree angle on each side, I was careful to make sure my holes were drilled through the thickest part and not too high where it would interfere with the hanging piece. To mount them to the wall, I'm using 2.5-inch yellow zinc interior wood screws, which were made of steel and really strong. I leveled each cleat and secured them to the wall using my impact driver. In total, I put 5 evenly spaced rows of cleats along the wall to maximize my options when it comes time to hang the tools. If you saw my last video, you know my workbenches are only secured on two sides, so I use this as an opportunity to screw them to the bottom of the new wall. I applied a coat of paste wax to the cleats and the wall was done. With the French cleat wall complete, I rehung the tools that already had brackets made, and I can already tell how much more efficient this is going to be. And not only that, but I think it looks really sharp as well. It's going to take me some time to get all these custom brackets made, so I'm going to make a separate video for that. If you want to follow along, be sure to subscribe, and if you watched all the way to the end, let me know in the comments. I really appreciate you sticking around.